We've got Hogan Gidley coming up live in the White House. Hogan Gidley, the Deputy Press Secretary for the President of the United States. And we got a lot to talk about today, so we appreciate his time. Hogan, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the time. I always enjoy it.
Okay, Hogan, lots to talk about. Number one, breaking news. The president, after dismissing John Bolton about a week ago, has named Robert O'Brien the new national security advisor. O'Brien, his envoy on the State Department, the president's envoy in the State Department to hostage negotiation. Tell us a little bit about Robert O'Brien.
Well, obviously, it's a very strong pick and someone who's been successful as it relates to hostage negotiations. This president has received more hostages about than any other president without giving up anything. As you know, Barack Obama famously did all types of deals with foreign leaders while giving away the store for someone like Bo Bergdahl, for example, releasing 5 terrorists. We didn't do that when we got the people back from Kim Jong-un and others. This president has had someone like O'Brien in his corner working for him, and that's been really strong. He's going to be a consensus builder. He knows the lay of the land. He understands the global threats we face, but also he's going to carry out the president's vision. I mean, one of the things that the president wants is he wants dissent. He wants debate. He wants discussion behind closed doors. But when he makes the decision, he wants that decision carried out, and we feel like Mr. O'Brien's going to be able to do that very well.
So, great pick, it looks like, by the president. And as you said a week ago on our show when we talked about the John Bolton situation, the president deserves to have a team around him that he believes in. He lost confidence in John Bolton for any number of reasons, and it's his prerogative and his right to do that. So we certainly wish Robert O'Brien the best. I'm sure he's a fine choice. Let's get to the Corey Lewandowski show yesterday, and I call it that because that's really what it was. Dragged in under subpoena, although he was going to go voluntarily. Then they decided to subpoena him, even though he was going anyway, which is kind of ridiculous. So they do that. 7 hours of people's time. I was fully entertained by it. I thought Corey did a phenomenal job and was very funny. And, it didn't cost me $50,000 to $75,000 for lawyers like it did him. I didn't have to go through it. I just got to sit there in the galley and watch it and laugh. But when are we going to be done with this? There's no obstruction. There's no collusion. There's nothing. They keep going to the same thing. They drag Lewandowski in, trying to bankrupt the guy. He's going to run for Senate and win. Can't talk about politics, obviously, with you right now, so that's separate. But Hogan, when does this end?
That's a question for Democrats, because right now it hasn't really moved off the same page, the same song, the same movie since they got elected in Congress. And one of the litmus tests they ran on was trying to impeach the president. So a lot of these folks are actually trying to do exactly what they told their voters they would do. Now, the problem is a majority of the American people don't want an impeachment, don't feel like it's warranted. I mean, the president has done nothing wrong, first and foremost, but the record successes he's put into place is a really, really, incredible accomplishment for him and the administration and for the American people. And that's what's so sad here. It's not the president that's going to suffer through these, not oversight, but overreach hearings by any stretch. It's the American people. When we have infrastructure that needs to be attended to, drug prices that need to be lowered, a southern border that must be closed, Democrats continue to focus on this ridiculous narrative of Russia. And let's be clear. First it was Russia. Then it was a recession. Then they talked about him being racist. They continue down this road over and over and over again, and they keep replaying the same game they've lost multiple times. It's not good strategy. Forget that. But it's not productive at all. They also ran on and won in Trump districts. A lot of these Democrats saying they were going to work with the president to get something done. As I lined out before, we have a lot of things on the table we'd like to accomplish. And instead, they rather continue on with political theater. And you saw that yesterday. They had no point to what they were trying to do, and I think Mr. Lewandowski exposed that brilliantly.
There was no objective, and their line of questioning was stupid. Now there's an article today in the New York Times, front page on their digital section, an opinion piece blasting the hearing, not Corey, blasting the way it was handled. Jerry Nadler saying that a lot of his members were upset with the way that he went about it. They felt that he strong-armed them into getting in Lewandowski's face, many of them not comfortable with how the thing went. Now that's blowing apart in their face, and so the beat goes on. Let's get to the economy, not ours but China's. Now, as you know, I'm a big proponent of the president's Chinese trade policy. I'm a populist, as everybody knows, and I'm a protectionist. So I never met a tariff I didn't like ever. So China's economy, the objective of the president's China trade plan is to bring the supply chain back to the United States, right? That's the objective.
That's part of it, sure.
Absolutely. China's economy.
Well, it's to create a free, fair, and reciprocal playing field. I mean, you've had politicians on your show many times, and they always say we want free trade and we want fair trade. Well, the free trade always comes. It's the fair part that never quite gets implemented, and it's because no one wants to go up against China. Well, while the Democrats continue to believe China is not a threat, this president sees it as a threat because they've been stealing intellectual property. They've been engaged in forced technology transfer over the years, decades of it, and it's really hurt American businesses and American workers, American industries, American farmers and ranchers. And the president, and the fact he's even able to have this conversation nationally is because he has also made our economy here in the United States so strong and on such solid footing, more than anyone ever thought, that he's able to stand up to cheaters across the globe, and China is one of those cheaters, and the world knows it. It's just this president has the guts and the backbone to finally stand up to it.
Well, and look, the Chinese hand is weakening because the country, the Chi-Com's released data Monday that showed their industrial production, an important indicator for their economy. Remember, they have 1 billion people to feed. It went up by 4.4% in August. That was down from 4.8% in July. This is the weakest they've had in almost 2 decades. So the Chinese economy is worsening. Ours keeps getting better. I think that puts the president in a very good negotiating situation. Don't you agree?
No, it absolutely does. Our economy is the best in the world, even while the globe is suffering to some degree. But it's because of the president's policies that we're strong. And he doesn't want other economies to be weak. He just wants the playing field to be fair. And the problem is, because they've been taking hundreds of billions of dollars from us every year, you can't just, snap your fingers and that be completely back on level ground. We had a deal in place. The Chinese walked away from it at the last minute. But the fact is, as you pointed out, the Chinese economy is really struggling right now, and so much the manufacturing is now leaving their shores, so much of the interest in China leaving their shores, and they're pulling away and eroding what made their economy, one of the things, I guess, that made their economy so strong. And so the president doesn't want these leaders to suffer. He just wants America to be on the same level playing field and not be the world's piggy bank, which we have been now for decades, as you well know. And he has a great relationship with President Xi, but he and the president of China understand that they both want to make a deal, but they also understand what's at stake here. And the president is clear-eyed, and also, per what he ran on, seeking success for America first. Other countries absolutely can succeed. He wants them to, but not at the expense of the people of this great country.
One of the things he said the other day is that the Democrats are becoming the party for illegal immigrants, and the Republicans, the president, is the party for the U.S. citizen and for legal immigrants, people that came here legally. And so things have gotten upside down, which brings me to the president's involvement here with the United Auto Workers strike, the president fully taking the side of the workers. How do you see that?
Well, look, the president obviously has met with members, with Ms. Barra from GM He has a good relationship with her. Also with the workers. Those are the ones who largely voted for the president to bring manufacturing back to this country, which he has done when everyone said it couldn't be done. He's grown the economy. Wages are up now in places like California, where he is today, despite the best efforts of the liberals on the ground and local government. The policies of deregulation have really grown to expand auto workers and other groups. He wants them to come together to some type of agreement. He wants them to make a deal. He's not willing to intervene yet or to get involved. This is obviously between the workers and the auto manufacturers, but he wants that to happen. It's not good for anybody when strikes like this occur, but he wants everybody to be treated fairly as well, and that's one of the things that he ran on and won on, and so we'll see what happens.
Well, look, the president has always been standing behind the American worker. I mean, that is a mainstay of what his policies are. So there should be absolutely no surprise. Meantime, there's a manufacturing boom in the United States. Hogan, I want to get your comment on the Federal Reserve reported U.S. manufacturing output increased by 0.6% in August, 3 times greater than the economist expectations. Every single month, Hogan, I just want to ask you this. Every month we get economic indicators coming out from Goldman Sachs and Wall Street. Every month. Then the results come out. It beats them. I mean, this is like clockwork. Two times, 3 times, 50%, 60%, 100%. Every time we get a jobs report come out, it's double what Wall Street says it's going to be. Why don't they get this economy?
Well, as the great Larry Kudlow, who works here at the White House, always says, the economy is the most undertold success story of this administration. And the reason they don't talk about it in the media is because they understand that people vote their pocketbooks and they vote on the economic issues that impact their families directly. And because the economy is so good, and because the economy is moving forward with record low unemployment for African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, women employed at all-time numbers, because it's doing so well, they don't want to tell that story or push that narrative for the American people so that so many out there can believe the lie that the Democrats and so many in the complicit and compliant media are telling them that the economy is in ruin and there's so many problems. You'll notice at the last several debates, not a word about the economy, because they don't want to talk about how their policies with Barack Obama and Joe Biden crippled this country for 8 years with anemic, record low growth, with horrible job outputs, with manufacturing leaving our shores, hurting middle America. This president's reversed all that, and they don't want to talk about it because it will remind the public how strong this president is on the economy. It's the first president we've had in a long time who's had to sign the front of a paycheck. So he understands how economics work, and you have seen that time and time again with the successes of this administration and how it impacts real families at home.
How long can the Democrats avoid talking about the economy, Hogan?
The only time they talk about it, and it was so funny, during the midterm elections, they brought it up in this way. A week out, they began talking about the economy, saying, why isn't the president touting his economy more? So they've been mocking the economy for the first 2.5 years, but when it came time to a midterm, they said that, well, it's because the president didn't talk about how great the economy was. Well, no, you didn't talk about how great the economy was, and that's not an opinion. That's just statistical data and fact. Not to mention the fact what was untrue even about that statement was every rally speech he gave around, we did the metrics, around 72 to 77% of it was all about the economy. So the lie was pushed that we weren't talking about the economy, and then the lie was pushed that somehow the economy wasn't really working until it came time for election time when they wanted to mock us for not using the economy. You see how it's circular logic that the media pushes out there? It's divisive, it's dangerous, it's disingenuous. But it also is a massive disservice to the American people who just want to get information from the news. They turn on TV to understand what's going on in the world. They don't want to hear your opinion, and you're fine to offer it, but put it where it belongs, in the opinion pages of the paper or on the editorial section. Quit masquerading your opinion as news. It is completely egregious and an affront to what real journalism and real news is all about.
Well, they're not going to do it because we had Steve Bannon on earlier, and he said their new model, their new economic model, is to do just that. They're continuing to get corporate advertising dollars, the big globalist corporations behind them, plus they get the clicks. They have an audience for that digitally. And so he said they're basically now changed their model from reporting the news to manipulating things. Speaking of manipulation and fake news, I just got to get your comments, and I know you've talked to the president on this, on the fake news New York Times article on Saturday night where they had to put a disclaimer in, retract it, disclaim it, move away from it, where there was some alleged accuser of sexual misconduct to Judge Kavanaugh, but the person said, well, I don't recall it, and I'm certainly not going to talk about it because I don't even know if I was there. And they neglected to put that in the article. They also neglected to put in that the person who was alleged this, Max Stier, was a lawyer for the Clintons. This is kind of pertinent info. I mean,
it's incredible. And it happens time and time again. It's no wonder that the media is so unpopular. It's why myself and the press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Examiner on this very piece. And we only talked about one specific instance, and it was the Washington Post. But it happens all the time, and I think I tweeted this yesterday, but have you ever noticed that every time the media makes a quote-unquote mistake, I mean, everyone can make mistakes, but every time someone makes a quote-unquote mistake in the media, it's never in favor of the president. It's always negative against the president. And there's a reason for that, because I don't really think it's a mistake. Go and look at any reporter that you like, any listener to this program who likes a reporter, a news reporter, for a news outlet, whether you think they're news or whether you don't, go look at their Twitter feeds. Go look at the snark. Go look at the comments that are smug about this president. They're not giving you news. They're giving you opinion. And bias comes in two forms: in how what you cover as a news outlet and how it's covered. So if you don't cover successes in the media, for example, successes in the economy by the media, that in itself is bias. When you do cover something like Kavanaugh and you omit a massive point that none of the evidence they talked about even exists, the person themselves, making the accusation doesn't remember the event itself, that itself is how they cover it. That also is bias. It happens time and time again, and I'm glad that myself and Stephanie called this out in the op-ed, because we're going to continue to do that. I don't want to preview too much here, but the fact is we're going to expose this time and time again because we're sick of it. Write the story the way you think the news should be delivered, but don't add your opinion. I used to be a journalist, and my professor at my university was a Marxist, socialist, atheist, but he would never let you put an editorialized word in a news piece for television or for print without giving you a failing grade, because he understood that while the First Amendment is there and gives you the freedom of speech, it also, as a news reporter, freedom of the press gives you massive responsibility that comes along with it. And we're in the middle of Constitution Week, and I think it would behoove the media to go back and reread that First Amendment and think about what exactly it means and the responsibility it carries. But it would also be wise for them to go one more amendment deep and check out the Second Amendment, which is the right to keep and bear arms, and think about, when you report on the Second Amendment, think about the responsibility you bear that you're granted with the First.
Well, I don't know when this started happening, but the level of fake news out there, or opinion that's turned into news, or just stories that aren't true, headlines that don't match the story, I don't know when this has started to happen, but it's now reached epidemic proportions. And I was telling a story earlier on the air that I grew up in the New York, New Jersey area, Hogan, Gidley, and there was a time my father worked in the newspaper business. He was a union worker pressman. So we got 4 newspapers a day: New York Post, Daily News, New York Times, and the Herald Tribune. And if he didn't believe something, he said, well, I'm going to go see if it's in the New York Times. Even though they were always editorial, very liberal, they backed all the Democrats and all that. But
sure.
that was the standard. It's like, well, I don't know if that's true. I'm just going to see if it's in the Times, and if it's there, it's true. Now it's the exact opposite. This is how far they've fallen. One other thing, and then we got to roll. I've given a lot of coverage on my show to the 80,000 homeless people in Los Angeles, the rat epidemic that's gone on there, and the fact that nobody seems to care about the vets who are there. Finally, our president is stepping in to the homelessness in California. He's there this week. What can President Trump do legally? What can he do about the situation?
Well, look, he's looking at options, but you kind of hit the nail on the head. We can draw attention to it from the bully pulpit of the presidency, and you go back to somewhere like Baltimore, for example. How long have people been clamoring for someone to draw attention to the fact that Baltimore needs help?
Years.
The president does that, and then they don't like him drawing attention to the problem. The reason why they don't like them drawing attention to the problem is because of who represents Baltimore, okay? That's problematic. So when Elijah Cummings represents Baltimore and has for decades and nothing's changed, it's gotten worse, you have to begin to look at your local leaders and your congressional leaders. California is a great example of that, okay? Instead of asking what's the president going to do, maybe someone should ask Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, and Maxine Waters, all of whom have massive problems with homelessness in their districts. And what have they done to affect it? Their congressmen and congresswomen, they go home to their districts, supposedly. They have conversations with folks in their local communities. It's only one district. It's not a countrywide or a statewide issue here. It's 50% of America's population who are homeless live in the state of California. Something's got to be done about it. We're looking at all types of options right now. I'm not ready to announce anything on your show, although I'm sure you'd appreciate it if I would.
Yes.
But the fact is, some of this has to stop, and we've got to figure out the best ways to keep our communities safe, but also get people off the streets, get them help if they need it, for mental instabilities, get them housing if they need it, and we're looking at all those options.
Hogan Gidley, we're out of time. I want to thank Hogan Gidley for being with us. Hogan is the Deputy Press Secretary to the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, in the White House live. Always very gracious with his time to give us an update of what's going on. Hogan, as always, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Hogan Mania.